So this week I've kind of been concentrating on the leaders of Israel. Bibi Netanyahu, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Who is he? What is motivating him? Where can we look at who he is, where he comes from, what his goals are, so we can better understand where he might lead this nation? Does he indeed have ties to the CFR, the Council on Foreign Relations? Does that make him a globalist? Is he what some people say a sellout? Well, we're going to try to explore different aspects. You can come to your own conclusion. We have as our guest today investigative reporter Barry Chamish, or Barry Chamish as some people know him. People either love him or they hate him. And his opinions and his information today on the show are his and not of Israel National Radios or Rutshevas. So take that as you hear it. You can. I'm here to provide information from different parts, different aspects, different outlooks, and you can come to your own conclusion. You can check out Barry's website and the many, many books that he's written on his website at www.barrychamish.com. That's CHAMISH, BarryChamish.com. Welcome to the show, Barry Chamish.
Hi. That business of love him or hate him, there's a nut in Haifa who sends out hate mail to your website, and he gives himself girls' names and stuff. I think the people who know me they don't write you.
You've got your fans and you've got your detractors, but that's another thing. We're not going to look at that right now. So Barry, you do a lot of investigative reporting. Sorry?
I prepared you a show. Just let me go, and I'll tell you the background to Netanyahu.
Okay, very good. Yallah, let's go for it. So tell us what you know.
Oh, I should add, you wrote an email, didn't know where it was. I gave a lecture in Vermont to the head of security of the Christian embassy, and it was very good, except for the usual, I'm wearing a veil and this nonsense that these Christians shove down your throat too much. It went very, very well there. Now, look, so I'm back home with, and that's the answer to your email. Okay, now, what you have to understand is that Netanyahu was groomed from a very early age, and for those who don't know what I'm talking about, just play with me, and I'll do my best to educate you. There is something called the Council on Foreign Relations. It actually exists, and it's only got like 4,200 members, but at the top they really determine Israel's future. Well, everyone, they determine American policy. But Netanyahu was a student at MIT, and he was noticed by one Ira Magaziner, and again, of the Council on Foreign Relations. Now, Ira Magaziner took him on and gave him this super-duper job at First Boston, I believe it was called. He was earning over $100,000. But then suddenly, in 1977, he threw it all away after less than a year to come to Israel and sell furniture at RIM Furniture. RIM Furniture is what it's called. He was selling sofas and hats.
You mean he went to America to sell furniture?
He went to Israel to sell furniture.
Oh, he went to Israel to sell? There's a store here called RIM?
Tamar, I said MIT. That's in Boston.
Right.
Ira Magaziner is certainly not Israeli. Let me go. I'm sure it got through.
Okay.
So Netanyahu comes back to Israel supposedly for patriotic reasons, and he ends up at RIM Furniture. And then in 1979, he organized an anti-terror conference. And remember, Netanyahu is thoroughly unknown, thoroughly. He's 27 years old. He had a brother suspiciously killed by Israeli forces in Uganda, but he himself is not known to anybody. But who shows up at his anti-terror conference? The top of the CFR. George Bush the daddy and Richard Pearl and George Shultz, the big boys, showed up at his conference. Now, the conference ends, and Bibi goes back to selling hassocks and ottomans and couches at Rim Furniture when in 1982, Moshe Aarons, the ambassador to Washington, declares that he wants Bibi Netanyahu to be the deputy ambassador to Washington. Now, you have to understand how angry the Israeli Foreign Diplomatic Corps was to hire to the second highest diplomatic post in the world a furniture salesman. That's what he was. He was a $12,000 a year furniture salesman, but Aarons had to explain to all these people why he bypassed legitimate diplomats for a furniture salesman, and he says that those who attended his conference in Jerusalem, especially Ambassadors Shultz and Richard Pearl, asked Aarons to appoint him to the post of deputy ambassador to Washington. That's how Bibi got his magic start. Now from there, they just pushed him. What are you going to say? I mean, he became the UN ambassador, and when he was there, according to all reports, George Shultz, every time he was in New York, which apparently was very often, dropped in on Bibi Netanyahu, and Netanyahu was all tied up with this Henry Kissinger. And here's how we know that. Here's a little evidence that half of Israel saw. 2 months before Yitzhak Rabin was murdered, he was on he thought he was telling a funny story on Channel 1 on TV. According to Rabin, and this is why by the way, he was shooting his mouth off like crazy. Rabin, that was some of the reason why he had to be knocked off. But he said that Henry Kissinger phoned him that day and told him that Netanyahu had called the night before and asked that American troops not be placed on the Golan Heights as part of a peace deal with Syria. And Kissinger now is yucking it up with Rabin, and the way Rabin tells it, he laughed at Bibi and told him to quit bothering him, but that's not what's important. What's important, the moral of the story, is that both the leader of the Israeli government and the opposition were taking orders from the same CFR officer, Henry Kissinger, who, believe me, is the worst nightmare the Jews ever had, and I won't go into that. No, I won't go into it. I'll get lost if I do that. But just to give you an example of who Netanyahu is really tied to, it's not the Jewish people. Let's go back to the year 2001, and Benjamin Netanyahu was in the middle of an American-speaking tour. When in New York, he met, George Shultz and Henry Kissinger. Now, this is from Netanyahu's own words. They're in quotes. They told him the time was right to have a elections in Israel. That's what they told him. We're going to have elections in Israel. I'm not going to go through the details of the Gaza withdrawal and all the stuff that came afterwards, but the point is Netanyahu hopped on a plane to Israel to meet Prime Minister Barak. Remember, Barak in 2001 was the Prime Minister of Israel. He had a meeting with Barak, flew back to New York. 2 days later, Barak resigned and called elections in which he would remain a candidate. And, of course, Sharon took it from him as they wanted it to be. Netanyahu, now, I'm not going to exaggerate. This man is controlled by forces outside of Israel. And if you think that he's just a very good actor, he's an top-notch faker. But let's go to another story, and this one I'm involved I'm involved with. Tamar, how much time do we have? I want to gauge this.
We have another 10 minutes to this segment.
All right, I'm going to do this amazing story. This was in April of 1997. I had given a lecture on the Rabin assassination at Hebrew University, and it was ridiculous. It was a week of being the first item in the news. There is me. It was I cannot describe to you how my life changed after that. Now, I get a phone call that week from Yaakov Moore. He tells me that he is the financial advisor to the minister Eli Swissa. And he says, we're very interested in your Rabin material. Why did they, and they is the Shabak in this case, why did they organize that riot against you? And we want to know why. Can I come over to your house? And I said, sure, why not? Now, remember, this is the Shas party, which, boy, did it get corrupted. But I'm not going to go through that either. Yaakov Moore, a nice guy, comes to my house. I was living in Barry Chamish then. And he says, what have you got? And I pulled out, well, I had about 80 documents at the time. I finished with 2,500. But they were pretty damning. They were ballistics evidence. They were medical evidence that proved Rabin was shot 3 times and through the front and all kinds of stuff that Amir couldn't have done. So he sits on my sofa and he says, just leave me be for a little while. So I just took out a magazine while he flipped through the documents. He turns it around to me. He stands up and puts his index finger on his lips. And he, with his other hand, he guides me out of the house. And he says, I'm not talking in your house. Do you know that those documents are real? They're authentic? And I said, yeah, I know they're real and authentic. And he says, do you know how high up this murder must have gone? And I said, yeah, I'm getting the picture from high up in the offices of Shimon Peres and so forth that they wanted Rabin gone. He says, look, I'm going to talk to my minister, Assassinate, and he'll want these documents. We'll make you a trade. So I said, fine. I wasn't sure if I'd hear from him again. And then he phones me. He doesn't phone me. A woman's secretary to Eli Swissa phones, and she says, the minister is very interested in meeting with you, and please bring your documents. We will exchange them for something. So next day, Yaakov Moore comes, picks me up. We drive to Jerusalem, and I go to Eli Swissa's office, and I'm told to sit in this room and wait for the minister. While I'm sitting in this room, I hear very energetic talking in the hall. At the end of this energy, someone, well, he's still the spokesman for the Shas movement, Yitzchak Sudri, comes in the office and sits down, and he says, I apologize, but the minister will not be able to meet with you. But in exchange for your documents, we will give you the biggest political scandal of the Rabin murder. And by the way, I would have given them the documents anyways. I wanted this thing. I wanted justice. I didn't realize how blackmailed Shas was. But nonetheless, I said, okay, you got a deal. I gave the documents. He gives it to the secretary, sits down with me, and he says, and by the way, he'll deny this today, but it happened. And I've got a few witnesses, and I certainly wrote it up as it happened way back then. Sudri says to me, there are more documents, but your documents are enough to blackmail the Labor Party. He says, I'm going to tell you what happened in the 97 elections, the ones that brought Netanyahu into power for the first time. He says there was a major meeting with the heads of both the Labor Party, and that, of course, had to be Peres, but also probably Chaim Ramon, Well, the heads of the Labour Party and the heads of the Likud, which of course one head was Benjamin Netanyahu,